Well, hey everybody, and welcome to episode 32 of the Pixar Post podcast. As usual, I'm TJ.
And I'm Julie.
And in this episode, we are going to get right to it with our next interview of the Pixar Pipeline Project, and we're going to talk with Angelique Reisch, who is part of the lighting team. We have a ton of great news that's going to be coming up for the next podcast, and this one, like I mentioned, we're going to scale it back. We're going to make it just about the interview. We apologize for the delay in getting this out. Typically, this would be out in September, but we had a couple scheduling conflicts along the way, and we were doing some travel. But regardless...
Yes, we're back!
Exactly. So we're going to be getting right into it. Let's talk with Angelique. Let's have you listen in with our talk with Angelique, and then we'll chat about it on the backside, eh?
Yeah, sounds great.
All right. So I'm extremely excited to talk to you today because from a lighting standpoint, I myself have a photography company, and I'm completely fascinated by light. And the area that I shoot in is specifically band and concert photography. So I was also excited when I saw that you are in a band.
I am.
Yeah.
I'm a drummer for one of our Pixar bands, Clown Car.
Absolutely, yeah. I, of course, did the research ahead of time, and I ended up checking you guys out as well. Some pretty good stuff.
Thank you.
And I've been a drum tech before, and I have actually played at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So... it's a pretty cool thing that you're a drummer as well.
Okay, we need to have tea or something.
Yeah.
that's too many coincidences. That's amazing.
I know, it's pretty cool. Yeah. But anyways, one of my photography idols, Joe McNally, said that in order to master photography, you have to master lighting. Yeah. So I'm obsessed with it overall. I have tons of strobes, flashes, diffusers, stands, etc. And needless to say, I'm jealous of the toolbox, the virtual toolbox that you're able to utilize to enhance and pull emotion, visual appeal, and all those types of things out of a scene. Mm-hmm. But before we get, I guess, too far down the path of me gushing over lighting and the Pixar movies that I've drooled over because of the lighting, let's dig into some of the questions.
Sure.
So... one of the questions, in fact, the question that we start off with everybody is fill us in a little bit about your department, the lighting department, and what does an average day in the life look like for a lighting technical director? And is that your title? Are you a lighting technical director?
Yes. And on this film, I'm actually a lighting lead, a character lighting lead on Inside Out.
Oh, great.
So, yeah, but that is the typical, lighters are lighting technical directors, correct.
Perfect. So what does that average day in a life look like for an artist, a lighting artist?
Sure. So our average day will come in, we've got our coffee, and you kind of sit down at your computer, and you basically take a deep breath, you cross your fingers, and you hope that the changes that you implemented in your lighting the day before look good in their overnight renders. So it's kind of a moment of, okay, did I, change everything correctly, and do the characters still look good, and does it look good in motion? Because typically we're checking things on keyframes, and we're lighting on keyframes. So, we don't have the ability to kind of check everything until we send our renders off overnight, and those come back, and we look at the full loop in the morning. Mm-hmm. So typically they do, thankfully. So they do look good. So once you get your frames back, the lighter will go through a process called walkthroughs with our director of photography, which I'll refer to as a DP.
Yep.
And walkthroughs are an opportunity to just sit down one-on-one with the DP, and the DP will critique your shots and give you notes. And what the DPs are looking for when you show them your shots are to make sure that the shot is communicating the intended mood for the story point in that shot.
Okay.
They want to make sure that the viewer's eye is directed to the intended location in the shot. They may be looking for distracting elements in the background that they want you to, maybe there's a bright prop in the background that's stealing all the attention. They may have you bring that down, so they're looking for distracting elements in the image. They're also making sure that there are appropriate value and depth cues in the image so that it has compositional interest and it really draws the viewer into the frame, which I'm sure, with your love of photography, you understand how important that is.
Of course, absolutely. Directing the eye, feeling for the flow of the whole piece is absolutely there, yes.
Exactly. So in addition to just kind of compositional elements, they're also trying to make sure that the characters look really appealing, that they have good shaping, You'll hear the term shaping a lot. We don't want to see flat characters. We want to see, nice round shaping across the faces of our characters and across their clothing. And then also just that the characters and the lighting that's on the characters is communicating the intended story point. So all of these things the DPs are watching for when they give you critiques on your shots, and that results in a series of notes that the lighter will get, which they'll then be responsible for implementing throughout the rest of that day. And it could be a matter of adjusting saturation of an image. Maybe they're desaturating an image to help it convey a more somber tone. It could also be adjusting the position of a main light source on a character to get a more appealing look, or it could be adding fog or atmosphere to make a scene feel more mysterious.
Okay.
So those are just a few examples of the kinds of notes that we might get. And then once we get our notes, we are off to our desks to implement them. We send our renders overnight, and we cross our fingers again for good-looking images the next day. And that is basically our process.
And the process continues.
Exactly.
So it's really interesting that you talk about, and one thing I didn't know leading into this interview was about where the DP comes into play in there. And one of the things that I've always been fascinated with when it comes to any of the Pixar movies is the consistency. Obviously, you've got all of these artists that are putting their touches on it between all the different departments, but especially in the lighting side of things, you're talking about from each artist to the next, you could have these drastically different kind of looks. Now, obviously, I know you're working with a general framework, and you've received notes that says this is the kind of vibe that we're going for the scene. But I do love the fact that you mentioned like the walkthroughs, that one person, the DP, is kind of keeping their eye on it, and they're able to kind of gauge that as well, as far as from a consistency standpoint.
Yeah, that is definitely something that they're looking for. We have these things called tableaus, which is basically, we have a sequence of shots, which a sequence is basically just a bunch of shots that occur at a similar time of day in a similar location. So they typically share the same kind of global or master lighting setup is what we call it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll get into that a little bit more later when we talk about the structure of the department. But in general, these tableaus have rendered images of every shot in the sequence. So the DP can quickly look across an entire sequence and see that, this packet that this person's working on is going a little too cool, or this packet is going a little too bright. So that's a great tool that we use just to keep continuity in our images across different lighters.
Wow. Okay. The other thing that you had mentioned as well was about, obviously crossing your fingers and hoping that the lighting comes across from what's rendered the night before. I remember at some point, and I don't remember if it was a demo for something that was, an advancement in the technology area of lighting. I know it wasn't, the global illumination part that was talked about for Monsters U, but where essentially instead of waiting for those renders to happen overnight, you can almost place a light, and then it almost looks like it's like pixelating and coming into the scene.
Right. So a lot of that, so we don't actually have that yet. That's something that is being developed. So hopefully on future shows we'll be able to use that technology, but we don't have any kind of progressive renderers available yet in production.
Okay, that's the word I was looking for, was a progressive. Yeah, I think I saw that on one of the demos when your team was, somebody from your team, I don't recall their name off the top of my head, was demonstrating the new Mac Pro.
Okay.
I think it was at a Maya event.
Yeah.
So yeah, okay. So anyways, that was just intriguing to me because, how does that...
Yeah,
obviously
we do. So we do have a tool called Lumiere, which is a more interactive. It's not like the progressive refinement renders, but it's a more interactive tool, and that does help. So I kind of tease about we're crossing our fingers. We can see we can see things on keyframes, and we can see renders during the day interactively. The question is often though, again, we're working on keyframes. So if you've got a character kind of running through the scene, you're making sure they look good at the few moments where maybe they pause or they hit a beat, but it's kind of looping your shot to make sure that it looks good. Is the kind of thing that we have to check. Once we've rendered up all the frames for the shot. Yeah,
absolutely. And I knew you weren't painting a a bad picture of the rendering as far as you're hoping that it's coming back, because it is. I mean, imagine anything and any work that anybody would do if you could only touch little bits and pieces of it, and then you have to send it off and see what comes back. No matter what, you're always going to hope that, even if you have the confidence, even if you know that the tools are there, it still is one of those things where it's like you're putting it in someone else's hands, and the computer is just doing its thing.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
yeah. So thinking about lighting and as far as timing, so when are you typically brought into the process for a project, and how is that work separated out among the other lighting team members?
Sure. So the director of photography is the first lighting team member on a film, and they're brought on very early in the process. Not the very, very beginning with the story, but as soon as things are kind of greenlit and we know that the film is happening, and it's crucial that they're on that early because they'll work very closely with the art director to establish the overall visual goals of the film. Mm-hmm. They'll talk about the way the light will change in saturation and contrast throughout the film, depending on important story beats. It's at this time they'll also decide if certain colors or shadowing choices may be reserved for special themes in the film. For example, in Up, when the color pink was reserved as Ellie's color.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So, after the DP, the lighting leads are brought onto the film, and it's also fairly early in the process. I've been on Pete Docter's summer 2015 release, Inside Out, for about 2.5 years now. So as one of those leads, I'm responsible for the characters and the character lighting in the film. So the benefit of this, and it's coming on early, is that I got to work side by side with the characters team as the characters were being shaded. And this gave us the opportunity to express concerns from a lighting standpoint very early in the process. And we have some really unique challenges with lighting and the characters on Inside Out, which
sure.
Are going to be amazing. I cannot wait to share them with you guys. But because of that, it was really a back and forth between lighting and characters on this film. In a way, I think we got in earlier and worked more closely together, I think, than any team has before, which is great because it also enabled us to develop a wonderful relationship with the characters team, which we still share today. And then we have three other lighting leads on the film. One is responsible for all of the sets in the film. Mm-hmm. One is responsible for the technical aspects of the film. And another one is responsible for the lighting render times and rendering artifacts.
Okay.
So that's how the hierarchy kind of works. We've got our DP and then our leads, and we each have divided responsibilities between those areas I just mentioned. And then in addition to the leads, the lighting work is divided into what we call master lighting and shot lighting. And master lighters are responsible for taking a sequence of shots that are at a similar location and a similar time and creating the lighting design for that sequence, for the most part from scratch. So they'll set the main key light direction, they'll set all the key to fill ratios, the overall mood of the sequence. It's a lot like broad brush strokes on a canvas.
Mm-hmm.
The details aren't completed, but you really get the sense of the emotion of the scene. And then once the master lighting is done, our amazing shot lighters come in and spend the time to do the detailed set and character work, and that's what really makes the shots sing. They handle any shot-specific work, like, adding ramps of light behind a character for interest, or, detailed character shaping and, really delicate, eye highlight treatment and placement, all the things that need to be done on a shot level.
Wow. I must tell you, I'm completely geeking out over here. That is so awesome hearing how it's all divided up and how it's so thought through, and obviously it would be. But it's just fascinating. So as far as you mentioned yourself being the lead then, and that leads to more of looking at the character work.
Correct.
How does that then trickle down as far as from the other technical directors that work? Are you working with a team of people underneath the lead role then?
So I'm kind of supporting the team of the lighters. So basically, so all the lighters, whether master lighters and shot lighters, if anyone has a characters issue, then I'm the one that they'll come to for questions. So and then likewise, if there's a sets issue, we have our set lead. If there's just kind of a general technical issue, we have our technical lead.
Gotcha.
So it's pretty nice. The division of responsibilities works really well, and the group of us work great together. They're awesome guys. So
fantastic. So you had mentioned the color pink for Ellie.
Uh-huh.
So one element that we absolutely love is how, and I have already alluded to it before, how light can make a scene look visually more appealing, but it can assist in evoking an emotion or help drive the symbolism of a scene. So you had mentioned, that color pink, like I mentioned for Ellie, and it's in the scenes. It's kind of hinted in the scenes. And we had talked about this on a previous podcast because I had heard about that little lighting cue, if you will, of the symbolism there from the Van Art's masterclass that I had attended. And so that pink is in there. Carl, it's part of his life. Once Ellie passes away, he returns home from the funeral. He closes the door to his house, and then it goes to more of the cool blue tone. Right. So are there other lighting cues like that have really helped drive home the emotion of a story, or another piece of symbolism like that you can think of as an example?
Yeah, so one of the ones that comes to mind, in Monsters University, there was a real deliberate play of light and shadow, in particular whenever a change would take place for one of the main characters, especially Mike. So there's actually even a scene when he walks off the bus for the first time when he gets to Monsters University. He's in shadow the entire time until he kind of reaches the pavement of the university. And then there's even an animation cue that he kind of looks down at the light and he kind of picks himself up and lifts his arms and walks into the light and walks forward on this new path. And it's a really beautiful moment because the character, it's so nice to see him animated to even just react to the light, but it also is just a nice pause to say, okay, here's this new chapter in his life, and he's going to step out of the shadow and into the light to become, this great scare.
That is certainly another great example of it. Yeah. And you're right. I hadn't actually paid attention to him because I can obviously visualize the scene, but I hadn't paid attention to the fact that you mentioned that it was also animated to him reacting to the light. That is a really super cool extra element because, obviously the light is usually there just to supplement and assist, but you're right. He reacted to it, and that was super cool.
Yeah, exactly. I love the interplay of the two departments and just the plan for that shot. He does it again at the very end of the film when he steps onto the scare school for the first time, and it's a very similar moment. And he kind of pauses and walks out of the shadow into the light. And I believe there are a few other moments in the film too. So go back and look at that because it's once you know about it, you're gonna watch for it everywhere.
Well, I remember hearing about a couple more too, like where instance Mike was in the shadow of Sully for the long time, and then all of a sudden once the tables turned, it was Sully that was in shadow.
Exactly. And when Sullivan cheats and he's left alone on the field, all the lights in the stadium go out.
Ooh, I didn't make that connection. Yeah. Ooh, good one. I love that stuff because that's it's all those extra layers. Like the music element of it, where it's all those extra layers that are just making you feel even more.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully we'd keep it subtle enough, but it's really fun to talk about later.
Yeah, obviously you don't want it to be something that all of a sudden it's always blinding light or complete blackness.
Exactly.
That's great. So in terms of an early interview that you had done with your college, Texas A&M, you had mentioned that on WALL-E that a particular focus was placed on the reflection of light and objects in Wally's eyes. So can you talk a little bit more about how that shaped his emotions and character?
Yeah, absolutely. So Wally is a special character in that he's made of metal, and most of our characters, I guess not our cars, but obviously, but most of our characters are much more organic. Even the plastic characters from Toy Story tend to feel more human-like than this character made out of metallic parts. So because of that, it was really important that as an audience member, you could feel the life in his eyes so that you connected with him as a living, breathing character. So one of the ways in shot lighting, and one of the funnest ways to do that, was to create these really beautiful, perfect little eye reflections in him, because you really got that sense that he was thinking and living. You could also use it in fun ways to reflect what he was thinking about. Like there's a lot of shots where he's reflecting Eve in his eyes when he's kind of pining for her attention, or we would put these real specific reflections of the plant in his eyes. In his eyes when that was his goal, when his goal was to find the plant,
right.
Or when she was holding it. So we used this throughout the film just really as a way for the audience to connect with him and then also to make that connection about what he was thinking about.
Wow. Yeah, obviously, that is something that as an outsider, you don't necessarily think about the challenges of this is a metallic it's a metal character with glass eyes.
Yeah.
You don't think about all those extra things. And it's so cool to talk about them because it really does it makes you step back and think a little further as far as all the other favorites that you have out there and say, what was the intention here and how was that shaped? So I guess, past WALL-E, was there a scene, or even if it was on WALL-E, was there a scene that posed a particular challenge from a lighting standpoint that you or the team had to unravel to get it just right?
Yeah, so one that actually comes to mind, keeping on the theme of WALL-E, I know that I did not work on it myself, but I know that the space lighting in particular was really, really tricky, like the space shots of the Axiom itself. And the reason is because we rely so much on atmosphere to make things feel like they're big and far away, because that's what we're used to seeing. When you're looking at a huge building, you're going to see a lot of atmosphere change, between the bottom of it and even the top.
Right.
So in space, we don't have that.
Right.
Everything's very crisp, extremely clear, and extremely bright. And that is the worst lighting environment to have in CG, because it makes everything look very CG, and it makes things, it doesn't give you the ability to play with scale the way that you can in an environment where you can add atmosphere so that things get desaturated and less contrasty as they go away towards distance. You don't have those depth cues that you would normally have. Mm-hmm. So I do remember that was tricky to get it to not feel so CG, but to also still feel like space. So that was an interesting challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it sounds like, there's always that balance between the science of light, if you will, and the artistic side. So it sounds like maybe a few rules may have been tweaked a little bit to make it more aesthetically pleasing, or make it look a little bit more real.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So was there one scene that you had worked on in particular that you're really fond of, or even just one that stood out really strong visually to you?
I have a few of those, but probably the one I'm most proud to have worked on is a scene of in the married life sequence in Up. Mm-hmm. It's just such a beautiful sequence. So to have had an opportunity to contribute to that was just a dream come true. But this was a scene of Carl and Ellie dancing. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of this pink. It's this beautiful kind of twilight image. Everything, it's this very saturated pink of sunset, streaming through the windows, and they go dancing by in a candlelit room. And it was so much fun to work on. It was like everything awesome, because you've got the setting sun, you've got these saturated colors, you've got this beautiful candlelight that's kind of spilling out. So that one was a blast. It was actually pretty tricky because the characters, since they're dancing, they spin around.
Okay.
And that can be actually a uniquely difficult thing sometimes in lighting, because they need to look good at all points in the shot, and you've got two of them kind of spinning around.
Sure.
So I used a trick that I learned from a friend of mine, where when one character goes behind the other character, you actually readjust the key light to a different position, so that when she comes back around the other side, she still looks beautiful and you don't notice it. So yeah, that was an interesting trick to kind of keep her beauty lighting, when she ducks behind him, but then, make sure that that's maintained when she comes around the other side, and there's not a huge shadow on her face from Carl or anything like that.
Very, very cool.
Yeah, it's very subtle.
You got to love those little tricks, but yeah, you're right. You don't notice it. So you
would never notice it. Yeah. That was one of my favorites.
Awesome. So much of lighting is technical. I kind of talked about it, leading into this, where there's that science element of it, with the bouncing of light, absorption, color, light fall off, accenting depth of field, and so on. Mm-hmm. And we've heard that lighting technical directors or lighting leads have to have a good understanding of light and cinematography. Mm-hmm. But if you look online, it's also mentioning that there should be this element of math and physics. And I know that could scare some artists away, hearing those types of things. But can you help us understand the balance between the science and the art and the math and the physics, as well as the cinematography side of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So the real beauty of, especially I'm not sure about other studios, but our Pixar lighting team is the diversity of the members who are a part of it. So in a broader scale, we have some of the most brilliant global illumination specialists on the planet who absolutely understand the math and physics of light transport to the highest degree. But we also have brilliant shot lighters who have never programmed, but who will light a shot that'll take your breath away, and they're much more on the artistic spectrum. So really, we're the epitome of art and technology in our department, and there's really a place and a need for everyone on that spectrum. We have people who have coded our own lighting tools, and we have people who are currently illustrating children's books in their downtime. So we're really lucky that we have amazing tools which tend to encapsulate a great degree of the lighting process, and that allows our artists to be artists. It really does free everyone up to focus on the image at the end of the day. I'm not coding on a daily basis. I'm not doing equations. Artists out there should not be scared. There are certainly people that do that here, but it's really up to you as a TD. You can be more on the coding end, writing scripts for the team. You can just put your headphones on and enjoy lighting a beautiful shot. And then there's a lot of people. I tend to fall a little more on the artistic end, but I enjoy the technical stuff as well. So I'm kind of mid-left.
Sure.
Yeah, but people fall anywhere in between. It's a really great thing.
That's great, because I had, as far as the people that I've talked with, they always say, I'd like to, but there's always that technical side of it that I'm not sure I have. And that's great that there is that spectrum within the one department. It's not just you have to have all or nothing. It's, diversification to make it great.
Yeah, and it is important to have good Unix skills, just to be able to get around in our environment and things like that, so good package skills. But other than that, yeah, you don't have to feel like you have to be an amazing computer programmer to be a lighting artist.
Right. Okay, so let's get to know you a little bit. One of the things that's a consistent question among all of our interviews as well is describing your journey to Pixar. When did you start? How did you get an interest in computer animation? And did you know that you always wanted to be in lighting specifically?
Good question. So my journey here is actually kind of serendipitous. I've always loved art and movies, and Toy Story absolutely blew me away when it came out. After high school, though, I was planning to attend Texas A&M University to study architecture, because living in Texas, I had no idea that working in the movie industry was an actual possibility.
Right, it feels so far away, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So to me, architecture was the closest thing to art that I could do. So that was my plan. Then I was at an open house for the architecture school, and I just happened to have a break in my schedule. And so I was looking through the program to see what was going on, and I decided to sit in on this lecture, which sounded interesting, and they were talking about the Visualization Laboratory, which was a graduate program within the College of Architecture for computer graphics. So 30 minutes later, I walked out the door, and my life completely changed. These students were learning how to make movies like Toy Story, and several of them had been hired by Pixar. So immediately I went to my advisor and I asked, how do I get into the Viz Lab for grad school? What do I need to do? He said first that it was really hard to get into because it's a very small, very selective program. But the next thing he said was that you have to be very strong in art. I was like, okay, great. Good,
sure.
Check.
Yeah.
But then he said you have to be strong in computer programming. And that was not so great. I had never programmed in my life at the time, but he suggested that the best way to get in was to get a computer science undergraduate degree to improve my technical skills. Mm-hmm. So that day, I switched from the College of Architecture to the College of Engineering, and I started off towards a computer science degree. And then a few years later, I applied to the Viz Lab, and one of the best days of my life was when they called me to tell me I had gotten in to the program.
Fantastic.
So that's how it kind of started. Also, another little tidbit, little did I know, the first day of the program, I would meet one of my fellow Vizzers named John Reisch, who 4 years later would become my husband. So it really did change my life.
Holy cow, yeah, that's pretty much everything that you could ask for right there.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And he works here as well. John is an effects supervisor on The Good Dinosaur.
Okay.
So both of us applied for technical director internships at Pixar in our second year of grad school. And then within about 3 months of each other, we were sitting at desks working as interns on Cars.
Crazy.
So pretty crazy, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So as far as in that journey, how did lighting come to be?
So I tried a lot of things in grad school. We had the opportunity to work on a summer project where a studio would actually come and send people, artists and technical directors, to come and work with us in that program to create a short film, a short project. So through that, you have the opportunity to see the story side and modeling and rigging and lighting and effects. And so it was a wonderful opportunity to try every part of the pipeline. And I just fell in love with lighting working on that project. And it felt like everything about art that I love, but now in this completely different medium.
Yeah, no, obviously you'd mentioned one of your processes along the way was the computer science degree. So obviously there's a little bit of software background there as far as programming and all those types of things. But talk a bit about the software and some of the technical side of the lighting department at Pixar. Are you working within Presto with the layout and animation teams, or how does the rendering team and the RenderMan software work into that workflow as well?
Oh, sure. So we don't actually work inside of Presto. We have our own proprietary lighting tool called Lumos, and it's an incredible tool. It's a rare day when I feel like, oh, I wish Lumos did that better.
Sure.
It's absolutely amazing tools. I definitely have the flexibility with those tools that I need to work efficiently. That's kind of our process. Presto and the departments that come before us, there's a conversion process between the models and the shaders and everything to get them out of Presto and into Lumos.
Okay.
But in terms of working with the rendering department, we don't work very directly with them on a daily basis, but we do go through a fairly rigorous process we call blessing of our lighting shots before we hand them off to the rendering department. And the blessing process consists of rendering about 15 film frames of the shot. And what we're doing is we'll render, the beginning of the shot, the middle, and the end. And we're just looking for rendering artifacts just to make sure that we catch rendering issues like shadows, popping or reflections crawling before we spend the compute cycles to render the entire shot at ones at film resolution. So once the shot gets blessed, it's off to the rendering department, and they'll go ahead and render it up on ones. And then we all get together and we look at it in the main theater on the big screen to look for additional issues.
So, and then one of the final questions that we usually always ask is about the lighting department structure, how people may find their way into the lighting department, and what skills they may possess. But based on what we've talked about, I think that you've covered a ton of those areas.
Oh, great.
Is there anything else that you can think of that you might impart to someone that would be interested in the lighting department, or any type of tips or tricks that they could maybe make themselves a little ahead of the curve on?
Yeah, absolutely. So it can be, at least here at Pixar, it can be tough to get into the lighting department right out of school because we've offered lighting internships occasionally in the past, but we haven't done it for a few years. So I would say if you're an undergraduate, your best bet would be to apply for the Pixar undergraduate program. It's a 10-week summer program where you come here and you learn all the aspects of the technical pipeline. And you're just learning. You're not working on a feature film. But we have technical directors that are working on films come in and teach you modeling, shading, lighting, rigging, effects. You get to work on team projects. And then also at the end of the program, you work on an individual project that you get to present for a room full of soup techs, and even Ed Catmull attends these.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a fantastic program. So I would say that's a great way to get your foot in the door, try out a bunch of different parts of the pipeline, and and if you want to do lighting, it's a great way to come in, work with some lighters directly, and potentially show your work in the theater here at Pixar.
Holy cow.
That's a great way to get your foot in the door.
Yeah, what an amazing way to not only, like you said, get the foot in the door, but start making contacts. And
exactly. It's a wonderful program.
Yeah, holy cow. Is that run every summer?
Mm-hmm. It's run every summer. We've been doing it, I want to say 5 years now.
I was going to say,
yeah.
I think I had heard something that it was like, what was it, 2008-9 time frame?
Yeah, it's been a while.
That's cool, though. That's something that, you hear about the internship program all the time, but I don't hear about that program all that often.
Mm-hmm. And then also I'd say just in terms of skills, obviously good photography skills are a plus. It'll give you an understanding of things like value and composition, but also painting regularly will also really help you use your eye to see and understand how light bounces around and reflects off of surfaces. We have a group of lighters that will go and paint, on a pretty regular basis and just set up a very simple still life, grab a reflective object, grab a refractive object, and just analyze, what is going on in the shadows, what is going on with the reflections, what color are the shadows, and mostly just practice really looking and analyzing light in the real world. Geek out about how atmosphere reduces contrast and saturation on the mountains in the distance when you're driving home. Look at the color of shadows on a bright sunny day as you're walking around. Notice how a light on a bright surface will bounce light back throughout a room, when you're just walking through your room at home. So there's really beautiful lighting scenarios in everyday life that I think we just typically don't always stop to analyze and appreciate. But once you're a lighter, you won't be able to stop yourself from doing that.
I know. Isn't it just the best, too, just seeing it all?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'll even throw one in just that helped me out since you mentioned photography specifically. It's a book called Light, Science, and Magic. It is one that kind of goes through all of those technical elements, and it breaks it down by here's the science of how and why it bounces off of metal, how it bounces off of wood, glass. I mean, it goes through everything.
Oh, that sounds great. I have not heard of that, and I'm writing it down right now.
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
but that's one that I would recommend to anybody listening as well, because that one really helped me from a photography standpoint and just seeing light differently as well.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so absolutely. So that's my contribution to this interview. So perfect. Well, certainly thank you for taking the time. Obviously, as you can tell, I have a great passion for the topic, and I completely am enamored by it. So thank you very much for helping me learn a little more myself. And then obviously for some of our readers as well, I'll even pull up one particular comment that we just got from a reader of ours today. And he says, been listening to you guys for a while. Love your enthusiasm and passion for animation. Makes one feel like a kid again. We all are still. And then he said, I replied back and said, thank you, of course, very much. And he said, awesome. I'm no animator, can't draw for beans, but I'd love to have my own animated film one day. The interviews inspire me.
Oh, that's great.
It's a very common element that we're hearing from this series of interviews. So I'm very happy that you were able to be part of it and represent the lighting department. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Perfect. Of course. All right. So there we have it. Our interview with Angelique Reisch of the lighting department. I said it as we were closing the interview out, and just so much great information there. And obviously I was geeking out being a lighting dork myself. I shouldn't say a lighting dork myself as if she is, but I am. Yeah. So either way, really cool stuff.
That has always been one of your favorite departments that we've talked about. And I feel like I say that with every single one of the departments that we've been interviewing for the Pipeline Project. But lighting has always been, I think since Wall-E.
Yeah, that was the one that definitely got me interested in that department specifically. And obviously, with the photography background, it lends itself to that as well, because I'm seeing things in terms of capturing light. But yeah, we do say it with a lot of these, but yes, this is the original one, and I will say that it's the one that's reinvigorated me the most.
Wow.
As far as just my interest in the arenas, in the areas of Pixar, and it's really driving me nuts. It's another one of those reasons we got to get there. So I guess as we've been going through these two, I'll be interested now that you're talking about this and saying how we keep saying that each time we have one of these interviews, either one of us keeps saying, I want to do that. I want to do that. I'd love to do that. Maybe I could do that.
It does. It almost just lights a fire inside.
I know.
Of that creativity, of that just drive.
Yeah, and
now I'm geeking out. I'm like, oh my gosh, let's start something tonight.
But it makes me want to
conjure up some creativity.
It makes us conjure up some creativity. It makes me want to interview and ask our readers and listeners what area that they feel that after listening to all these so far that's been intriguing them the most.
Oh, I would love to know.
But I think we'll hold that off specifically until the end after we finish.
Yeah, that's probably better. I want to know now.
I know you do. But so go ahead. Satisfy Julie's need to want to know. If you're listening to this and you're interested and you've been inspired by one of these, or if you feel like it's helped you kind of reinvigorate your interest in a certain area, let us know which one that you're most interested in and feel like, hey, I want to do this.
Right.
So of the areas that she talked about in the interview, there's a couple that stood out to us. And one of those was the little trick that she talks about that she learned from another coworker or friend, I can't remember off the top of my head, was about moving the key light during the married life montage. It's when Carl and Ellie are much older.
It's towards the end of the sequence.
Towards the end of the sequence, yep. And they're dancing. There's a candle in the background. And it's such a simple thing. We watched it a bunch of times after the interview. And you would never notice. And she says you'd never notice. So the key light, you can almost, I took my pencil and I pointed, okay, here's the key light. And then at the moment where Carl is rotating clockwise, or to the right, I should say, he's rotating his body to the right, that key light would be blocking her face because now the key light would be aimed at the back of his head after they've rotated.
So there would have been a shadow on Ellie's face.
But you want to, as the lighter, make sure that why would you want to highlight the back of his head? You'd want to highlight her face.
Right.
So she said she moved the key light to the other side, and then sure enough, it slowly transitions back to its original position in the upper left again.
Very subtle, but we watched it a couple times and I was like, that's a clever trick.
Yeah, I like those kind of things because obviously that's the kind of details that, just watching the movie, you're never going to notice because it's, again, like she talked about, if they're doing their job right, you're not really paying attention to it. You're just feeling it. You're just going with it. So really cool. I liked that one a lot. The one that I know you had mentioned after you listened to it was about what you had learned in the Monsters University
the press
event, right?
Which would be just the subtle, I guess, the shadows that they used subliminally for Mike and Sully during Monsters University, where when Sully is doing well, this is when they're kind of bickering, fighting, not really coming together. Sully's in the light and Mike is in the shadows, but when Mike is doing well, Mike is in the light and Sully's in the shadows.
Right.
And I know there's one really big part that you really like where Mike as a character is interacting with the light.
Yeah, when I talked about when he steps into the light, how she had pointed out that he interacted with it. His eyes looked at the light, and then it made you kind of subliminally think he's stepping into the light, and then his shoulders went up. His eyes got his eye got bigger.
Yeah. For that brief moment, the light became a character almost.
Yeah, it was
that
really
scene
cool.
When Mike gets off the bus when he's first stepping into Monsters University.
Yeah, again, another one of those really, really subtle moments, but loved it. Because we had already, like we said, you already knew about that from the press event, but we didn't know about the other.
Right.
So I thought that was really cool. And then the other thing that I know that you really liked was where they talked about the undergraduate program.
Yes. Oh my gosh. The amount of education that Pixar is, sharing with everybody, or, especially because the Pixar Underground program is...
Undergrad.
I'm sorry.
Underground.
Did I say underground?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I've got Monsters University on the brain. I'm thinking of the scare games.
Yeah, exactly.
The undergrad program it's like an internship, and then there's another level of internships, and then they have the Pixar University. It's just
for the employees.
It's just endless education that they offer.
Right, and when I was talking with her, I said, hey, do they run that all the time? Because I was thinking about it, it's listed still under the internship programs. And that, like she mentioned, it's that 10-week program, but that's just so amazing to be able to get that flavoring of all of those different departments. Yeah,
and I think that's really important, especially for, maybe not someone like you, because I feel like your heart is found its place. You really like lighting. I think it's lighting, editing, animation for you.
Probably. I think you're right.
But for me, I feel like, I don't know. I guess I really like storyboards. So
I was going to say, you always talk about your story department.
So maybe this wouldn't make sense for me. But I guess if you really just love so many departments, maybe it would help you find your path.
Right. No, I think that's fantastic. And plus, like I told her too, you're making all these contacts. You're getting to know all of these people within Pixar that when it comes time for either another internship where you're going to focus in on a particular area, or when you're going to then get hired in potentially. I mean, that's to have those contacts, to have had that breadth of here's all the departments and kind of had that overview. That's just totally invaluable. But yeah, if somebody's interested in this, that is absolutely something that I would be all over.
Right.
So
it's never too late.
Absolutely. It never is.
We could still do it. It's never
Well,
too
she
late.
did mention that her and her husband both got hired within a couple months of each other. So, hey, there's hope for us.
Yes. It's never too late.
Right. All right. Well, that about wraps up episode 32 of the Pixar Post podcast. We certainly hope you enjoyed the next line of the interview with Angelique Reisch, and thanks again to her and for shedding more light on the lighting department.
Oh, goodness gracious.
Come on, that's pretty good.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
All right. All right, as usual, we want to make sure to remind you to follow us on all of our usual social media channels: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Vine, Pinterest, YouTube, Google+, and subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or Stitcher. You know I love saying that fast. I say it every time.
I know. I think you try to say it faster each week or each month.
I need to be like the Micro Machines guy.
Oh, no. That's a reference.
Yeah. So, and like we always like to remind too, lastly, if you like today's show, be sure to let us know. Rate us on iTunes, leave a comment on our site, or send us an email to info@pixarpost.com. And of course, get ready for next month's Pipeline interview, where we're going to be talking to somebody from the effects department. So pretty cool stuff. We're going to get some more detailed information, and we'll see if maybe this is Julie's one that she's connecting to the most. All right,
I don't know. Story has me.
All right, well, signing off as usual, I'm TJ.
And I'm Julie.
And be sure to stay tuned to PixarPost.com all week for the latest Pixar news.